we will get started. So, as I mentioned before, Mentor New York has been partnering with the New York City Department of Education around Success Mentors for several years now. My name is Brenda Jimenez. I'm the Director of Operations and Growth Strategies, and my colleague Bruce Beckwith, the Program Development Director here at Mentor New York, will help facilitate this session, and I will hit it off to my other two presenters.
Great. I'm Sarah Peterson. I'm the Director of Research and Development for the Office of Community Schools.
And I'm Sarah Jonas, the Executive Director of the Office of Community Schools. Next slide, please. Brenda, are you able to advance to the next slide?
Sound.
So we'll just, as we're pulling that up, I'll just share a little bit about our agenda today. So we're going to be providing an overview of chronic absenteeism. We're going to be talking a little bit about ESSA and about, kind of the accountability measures that ESSA has in place for chronic absence. And we'll be talking about how to start a Success Mentor program, what are those key ingredients, and how to sustain a thriving Success Mentor program in your school. And at the end of the session, we'll have some time for Q&A. Okay, so while we're working on getting those slides up, just to talk a little bit with you about what chronic absenteeism is. And so as a reminder, I think for many of you, this is a refresher, and our system's done quite a bit around building an understanding of chronic absenteeism. But chronic absenteeism is defined as missing at least 10% of school days in a school year for any reason, excused or unexcused. And we know that chronic absence is a primary cause of low academic achievement, as well as a powerful predictor of, students' graduation, whether students graduate on time or whether they have challenges in terms of graduation or even dropout. And again, when we think about chronic absence, it's important for us to hold that being absent for as little as 2 days per month, results in, over a 9-month period, results in that student being chronically absent. So really it's as little as 2 days a month, every month of school can result in chronic absenteeism. Brenda, just checking in to see if how are we doing on those slides? Because what I'm able to see is still the first slide with the facilitators. Hello?
It sounds like we've lost Brenda, but I think we should just keep going with the webinar for now, and we'll share, and we can also redo this webinar again.
I think that's a great idea. Okay, so again, if you could, we'll share, assuming we get the slides up soon, but we'll share the deck and we will redo the webinar as well. But just talking a little bit more about attendance and chronic absenteeism. So we know that attendance, if we only look at attendance, average daily attendance, that can mask chronic absenteeism. And so what do I mean by that? Typically and historically, schools look at have to look at average daily attendance. But we know that you can have a school with what looks like pretty good attendance rate, for example, 89% attendance rate, and still have a sizable portion of your student population being chronically absent. And so if we're only looking at average daily attendance, it's just not good enough. And we know that most schools think that 90% attendance is okay because 90%, for example, on a test is a good score, right? It's a good grade. But with attendance, if you have a 90% attendance rate at the end of the school year for your school, the average student has missed 1 full month of school or 110 hours of instructional time. So again, this idea that with attendance, 90% is not good enough.
You can fast forward to the next two more slides. Thank you. One more. Okay.
We talked a little bit here to what I talked about earlier. So looking at some schools' average daily attendance rates, and then the sort of smaller orange bar showing that these schools can still have a high percentage of chronically absent students. So you need to look deeper at your data and really focus on, on chronic absence. And then, when you see that, what percent of students are chronically absent, you go one layer deeper, right, to look at who those students are and really uncovering and unpacking that data. Next slide, please. And we know that, again, as we talked about earlier, we know that students who have poor attendance or who are chronically absent throughout their schooling are much less likely to achieve academically and to graduate on time. So, for example, students who are chronically absent in the early grades, in kindergarten and first grade, are much less likely to read proficiently by the third grade. And this chart is showing, on the left, you have 60 students who have no attendance risks. Right, so those students, 64% of those students will read proficiently by the third grade, versus on the right-hand side, students who have high attendance risks or who are chronically absent or severely chronically absent, only 17% of those students will be reading proficiently by the third grade. And we know that third grade reading is one of those kind of cornerstones and predictors of future academic success. Next slide, please. So I think we go. We talked about this a moment earlier, so we can continue on here. Again, at 90% when we're talking about attendance, 90% is not good enough. So there are three main categories of chronic absence when we talk about unpacking that data on chronic absenteeism. Research shows that there are three main categories of chronic absence. So we can pull those in on the slide. So let's continue on with this slide. So the three categories of chronic absence that will come up in a minute here on the slide are cannot, will not, and do not attend school. So on the left-hand side, one category of chronic absence are students who cannot attend school. So these are barriers that prevent students and or families from bringing students to school on time each day. And these can include things like illness, family responsibilities, housing instability, involvement with juvenile justice, or transportation challenges. The middle category are students who will not come to school. So this is where there's something perhaps happening at school that is, the child is not feeling safe or not feeling connected in school, and so they're choosing not to come because of that. And these are things like bullying. The child may feel unsafe at school, may be experiencing harassment, or perhaps embarrassment, such as, for example, a student who is not reading on grade level and perhaps is choosing not to come to school because they feel embarrassed or ashamed that they're going to be sort of, shown up or shown out in class as not being on grade level with reading, for example. And the last category is do not, and these are students who and or families who are not coming to school perhaps because they don't see the value in school. Maybe they've had negative experiences themselves in school, and so that's playing out with their children and with themselves. The student maybe has something that they'd rather be doing, or there's this perception that many of us hold that attendance only matters in the older grades, and a perception that the earlier grades are more sort of for play or for kind of less rigorous in terms of academic benefits of the early grades, which of course we know is not true. But many of us and many families may still believe that, and so it's important to share that information that attendance matters at every grade, including pre-K, in terms of students' future success in school and beyond. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Peterson now, and she's going to talk a little bit about how ESSA plays into all of this in our schools.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So the important thing to remember as you begin to start your Success Mentor program in your school, which we'll talk about in a minute, is not only is there the adaptive change work that needs to happen because you understand the gravity of chronic absenteeism and its impact on student achievement, but also because at a state level and federal level, schools are being held accountable to chronic absenteeism targets. If a school has a level 1 status on chronic absenteeism, they will be held accountable to meeting a target every single year over the next 5 years. To start, to explain that very briefly, you should know that New York State says that every school should attain a 5% chronic absenteeism rate. So in a field of dreams, every school has a 5% chronic absence rate. But they also acknowledge that that's not possible. However, However, what is possible, they believe, is a reduction of chronic absenteeism by the difference between the baseline chronic absence rate, so the rate that a school had in 2016-17 versus the 5%, and that they should reduce that gap between the baseline of 2016-17 and 5% by 20% over 5 years. And what that translates to is the following. So go to the next slide. Okay. So measuring chronic absenteeism in New York State is as follows. There's grade levels 1 through 12. It's students who are considered as part of the formula are those with 10 or more days on register with a minimum of 1 day present. So 10 or more days on register with a minimum of 1 day present. So it is defined, so in that formula, it is defined as 90% attendance or less. So a student with 90% attendance or less who has been on register for 10 days and came to school at least one of those 10 days is part of the formula for a given school. Okay, so let's go to the next slide to really understand what the target is. So next slide. So say you are a school which in 2016-17 had a chronic absenteeism rate of 24.2%. And the state has said, hello school, you have a level 1 status. That means that you haven't made a lot of progress on chronic absenteeism, and it's now time to take steps to reduce chronic absenteeism over the next 5 years. You have 24.2% in 2016-17, and well, aspirationally, we want you to get to 5%. We're going to take the difference between 24.2% and 5% and get to a gap of 19.2%, which we're then going to times by 20% to get you a 3.8% reduction goal. This is important because the school needs to know that it needs to reduce its chronic absenteeism by 3.8% from 24.2%, okay? So the goal is to reduce by 3.8% over the course of 5 years. That's not impossible. With the right strategies in place, this school can completely reduce chronic absenteeism by 3.8%, as measured by that formula that I just discussed, with each kid being 10 or more days enrolled and 1 day present. All right, so the yearly gap for this, in other words, the yearly target for this school is 0.8%. Reduce your chronic absenteeism rate by 0.8% each year, with the first year being 2017-18 at 23.4%, the second year being just last year at 22.7%, and 21.9% being the goal for 2019-20. That takes you all the way through over 5 years with a total rate of, sorry, I'm just trying to see the slide here, 21 something. Sorry, I'm looking at a slide that I can't see very well without my glasses. So the goal is that they have to reduce by 3.8% over the course of 5 years. In order to find out what your school's chronic absence target is, go to the next slide. You're going to go see the second link here where it says ESSA accountability designation. What you're going to do is click on that, and you're going to see a bunch of spreadsheets, one of which is the ESSA targets, the chronic absence targets for the New York State. It has every single school on that list, and you're going to see what your chronic absenteeism level is, whether you're 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's going to show what your targets are for every year. And if you are a level 1 school under chronic absenteeism as your measure, and you will want to take very seriously, you will want to look very carefully at what your target is over the course of 5 years and come up with a plan, a 5-year plan, if you will, or actually a 3-year plan because we're already 3 years into this. Come up with a 3-year plan to end strong and meet your 5-year target. And I went through the description of what this formula is, not to like create an overwhelming amount of information for you, but merely to show that like the state is taking this very, very seriously and has a very specific formula it's using to help schools achieve a target that's both reasonable but ambitious. All right, next slide. So as we go to the next slide, we're gonna talk about success mentoring today as like a key strategy for reducing chronic absenteeism to help schools achieve those 5-year targets and help schools create that adaptive change that's necessary to look at chronic absenteeism differently. But success mentoring is part of a strategy that the school has to undertake, which many of you have heard. But it's if you become an average and everyday school and really take on that mindset, you develop an active attendance team that proactively meets every week for 45 minutes. You initiate your average and everyday work, completing an asset needs assessment. You define clear school systems and practices. You have a very obvious average and everyday attendance plan and policies that's shared widely with families, with school staff. You personalize student interventions based on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, create a supportive environment framework that's available through the Division of School Climate and Wellness. And you partner with communities because leveraging you as a school cannot do it alone. You see that over and over again. You've seen that over the last 10 years. Schools cannot reduce chronic absenteeism alone. They cannot even reach that 3.8% reduction target that we just saw in that example without leveraging communities. It's impossible. It's impossible. So how do you leverage community partners to support this work in reducing chronic absenteeism and creating a supportive environment is key to the success of your school in reducing chronic absence and helping every student attend school every day. We're going to do a deep dive now into personalizing what student intervention will be, and that is in this webinar, the Success Mentor Program.
Great, and so with that, we're going to turn it over to our partners at Mentor to get us started in a conversation about why mentoring.
Yes, thank you. So as many of you and your school leaders are aware of the early warning signs of how students start to signal being off track, navigating key transitions that are essential to them graduating and getting college and college ready. Your school may already have some of these systems in place that Sarah and Sarah were speaking of tracking attendance, schoolwork, behavior indicators that lead to suspensions. If not, you're actually going to start looking at that in that system within your network. But we also know that early intervention is key in order to make sure that students are successful and reach their goals. So how do we intervene? Once you know which of your students need support and have a sense of what they need, what do we do next? For us here at Mentor New York, the intervention can't exist without relationships. Relationships are the center of successful student support interventions. Relationships are very often at the heart of meaningful transformations for students' experiences and outcomes. And knowing how to assign the right intervention depending on what students need is key. But we also know that having human systems in place make or break the effectiveness of our work with those students. And that's why we're going to focus on sort of mentoring and mentoring relationships through Success Mentors today. Mentoring as a support or intervention is seen as a targeted support you put in place for students identified as chronically absent or at risk for chronic absenteeism. And that can be preventative and in a proactive approach. But mentoring is also much more than that. Relationships and mentoring plays into any of the interventions you may put in place at your school. You can build a culture of mentoring that supports relationship building school-wide. You can identify which students are at risk from chronic absenteeism and systematically support them in building relationships with mentors who can support then the transformation that they need to have. And though mentors aren't clinicians, mentors can help recognize when students need more intensive individualized supports to ensure that they can access their education. So as we move into the conversation about mentoring and relationships, I want to share a quote you see on this slide. The perception that teachers care about their students is among the strongest predictors of students' performance. You know, when you think about that and you unpack that, this comes from Carol Dweck's work, Gregory Walton, Jeffrey Cohen's research about academic tenacity, if you are familiar with it, where they investigated the non-cognitive factors that promote long-term learning and achievement. When they looked at students' ability to overcome challenges and proceed towards their long-term goals, relationships with teachers were amongst the biggest indicators of their success. That means that there is so much promise that we can tap into when it comes to the relationships between the young people and the adults in their lives, not just teachers, but also other caring adults within the school structure and after school spaces, especially when these relationships are built intentionally and systematically, and when they are supported by the school. But we all know that there are many challenges for teachers and other adults to build these relationships. I'm sure that folks on the line have many examples, and we hope to feel free to chat about them. But crowded classrooms, packed schedules, the intensity of testing, prep, all of these place pressures on teachers and other potential mentors and can make it difficult to achieve the kind of trust, positive regard, warmth, and respect that classifies these caring relationships. So how do we build a case that will help the leadership and mentoring champions in your school take the lead in making sure students feel they belong, know they are cared for, and receive the support they need to succeed? You show them the data and a roadmap of success, similar to what Sarah and Sarah have shown you. Success mentors can act as an intervention for many of the targets that your leadership is trying to meet in order for your school to thrive. As I mentioned before, our mission is to close the mentoring gap. And we know that 1 in 3 young people in America are growing up without someone like this, someone who cares about them, assures them that they are not alone in dealing with their day-to-day challenges, and makes them feel like they matter. But schools are a place where young people are interacting with caring adults every single day. That's why we consider schools and school districts an essential partner in achieving this goal. It's schools that can find ways to intentionally support students in building relationships with caring adults and close this mentoring gap. And the reason we care about attendance is because students can't benefit from school if they aren't there. There are so many positive outcomes we want for youth, from graduating from high school to going to a meaningful career and pursuing higher education, and being engaged and informed citizens, giving back to the community, living safe and healthy lives. All of these outcomes are tied back to whether they are in school. So we see attendance as one of the most urgent goals for our mentoring work in this education space. I'll hand it over to Sarah again.
Thank you, Brenda. So as Brenda was saying, in order to have these, kind of leverage mentors to support chronically absent students, it's important to match as many students as possible who are chronically absent or at risk of being chronically absent with a success mentor. So what is a success mentor? Again, reinforcing what Brenda just talked about, a success mentor is any caring adult or peer. So for example, you could have high school students mentoring, seniors mentoring freshmen, but it's any caring adult or peer who mentors a chronically absent student to help identify the barriers preventing them from attending school each day. And of course, sort of the key strategy for that with regard to a success mentor is that building of a trusting and positive and caring relationship between mentor and mentee. Again, anyone can be a success mentor. And when you're thinking about trying to ensure that as many students as possible have a success mentor, you want to think broadly around who can be a mentor. So mentors can be teachers, they can be principals, school safety agents, school aides, and community partners. Anyone in the school who cares about kids and wants to be part of a powerful strategy to ensure kids are connected to school and coming on time each day can be a success mentor. Success mentoring is low cost and scalable because it really relies most on relationships and the power of positive relationships and caring adults in schools. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the next slide about what success mentors do each day, kind of what does the day-to-day look like. And so a couple of key strategies for success mentors. The morning meet and greet. So the idea here is that the mentor greets their mentee as early in the day as possible, ideally even when they're entering school, in a positive way. So, greeting your mentee by name. Hi, Sarah, it's so great to see you here today. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to have a great day. If the student was out, you can add in something there around, we missed you yesterday. We love having you here. Is everything okay? So that kind of, early in the day as possible, positive greeting, personalized greeting, and connection to school is really critical. Second important strategy that success mentors use is a phone call home every time a student is absent and sharing a positive message. Ideally, that's done the same day that the student was absent and as early in the day as possible. Again, similar to the meet and greet, the key word here is positive. So the phone call home, and research bears this out, is something like, hi, we're calling from the school. We noticed Sarah isn't here with us today and we missed her. She's a great member of our school community. Is everything okay? Is there anything we can do to help? Okay. As well as phone calls when young people are in school to reinforce positive attendance. So we're calling to say how happy we are to have Sarah here at school with us today. She's a great kid. We're so happy she's here. Even maybe something special about the student. She's a great artist and she's doing a great project in art class, for example. And those phone calls, again, are used not only to flag for families when a student is out, but to build a relationship with the family to help support positive attendance and to, again, build that relationship around a positive, individualized messages about children to help connect children and families to the school. Mentors meet one-on-one or in small groups with their mentees. And this can include things like lunch clubs or other activities that are fun and engaging for students and help connect them to school based on their interests and assets. And lastly, recognizing and celebrating even small successes. We know that many schools do have in place, for example, recognition and awards for 100% attendance. In order for mentoring to work well for students who have a history of chronic absenteeism, mentors are going to need to recognize even small incremental improvements in students' attendance and really celebrate those steps along the way. And when, again, in order to do this, you need to have a system in place for mentors to track students' attendance and improvements so that they know, what their gains look like, what their patterns look like. And it's not the job of the success mentor to solve every challenge or develop every intervention. Their most important job is that positive relationship with the mentee and the building of trust so that the mentor can help uncover any barriers that the child or family might be facing that might be getting in the way of their regular attendance, and then connecting with the right people within the school, be it a guidance counselor, be it a community school director, the principal, whomever they can connect with to help resolve, problem solve, and strategize around appropriate interventions and support. And that includes, as Sarah mentioned earlier, connecting with that weekly attendance team to help, again, develop strategies and support for individual students and groups of students to support positive attendance. Next slide, please. We know mentoring works, so it sort of seems like good common sense, right? I mean, mentoring seems like a good thing for anybody and any child. We know from research that success mentoring works. This study, which was done by Johns Hopkins based on success mentoring in New York City, showed that students with a prior history of chronic absenteeism who were paired with a success mentor gained nearly 2 additional weeks of school, so about 9 days of school, which was found to be educationally significant. And we know, again, from this research and others, that students who exit chronic absenteeism, including those who are paired with mentors in this study, improve academically. So really powerful evidence to back up this strategy. So in the next several slides, we're going to talk sort of brass tacks about how to get started with success mentoring. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of and strategies for pitching success mentoring. So how do you create that buy-in? We're going to talk about recruitment of success mentors. We're going to talk about what to keep in mind in terms of matching success mentors and mentees. We're going to talk a little bit about how to train success mentors effectively, how to create and sustain a culture of mentoring throughout the school and the school year, and how to have a plan for closure, you know, in terms of those mentor-mentee relationships. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Sarah Peterson, and she's going to talk a little bit about how to pitch success mentoring in a way that will make it stick and it will increase buy-in and take-up of the mentoring strategy.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So to get started, as evidenced by the slide here, the best way to get started with success mentoring is to have a 30-second elevator pitch handy at your fingertips. So if you are on the elevator with your principal, you know, have a planned approach toward how you're going to hook her or him in launching a success mentor program. It should include data. So one example might be, hello, Mr. Principal or Mrs. Principal. I've been giving some thought to our 30% chronic absenteeism rate, and I know that this program called Success Mentoring has great effects, including including helping students gain 2 weeks of school. My hope is that we can start small and launch a Success Mentor program with a couple of staff members. Would you be up for this? And if you just point out that Success Mentoring helps kids gain 2 weeks of school and that you have a chronic absence problem and know exactly what that number is, that's a huge advantage, knowing the percentage point exactly, then you can, if the principal says yes, then you can pitch this idea at an all-staff meeting, say the Monday staff meeting after school. You can pitch this idea using a couple of slides that we have available on our website at www.communityschools.nyc, and pull up those slides and use them at a Monday PD and pitch this idea of a Success Mentor program as a strategy to reduce chronic absenteeism.
And I'll just add that it is, you know, the data that we shared earlier about the link between chronic absence and student success, student achievement is really important. Again, sometimes it seems like common sense, but by sharing the data, you know, and talking about it publicly with the entire school staff and partners, really engages people in the power of this particular metric, attendance, as a powerful, both indicator and area to address if we want to support student achievement. So I'm going to pass it back now over to Mentor, and they're going to talk a little bit about, to Brenda, around how to recruit success mentors for your success mentoring program.
Hi, so here's a voice you haven't heard yet. So we're going to talk first about, we're going to try to do this in the steps. We're going to talk about how to recruit mentors. It's always a good idea to have a mentor job description, a one-pager that explains how the program works, what the mentor's responsibilities are, and the characteristics you're looking for in a good mentor. Successful mentors are able to form an alliance with students, easily express empathy, and show positive regard, and they're genuine. Find recruitment partners in your admin support staff and other school partners. By that, what I mean is go to people and ask them who they would recommend. Who do they see that develops good relationships with students or has good rapport? Not everyone who volunteers to be a mentor may be the right pick for your program. You don't have to say yes to all the candidates, no matter how much you are in need of mentors. Design a mentoring match launch event to make it more comfortable for students. There's always safety in numbers. And engage participants in icebreakers and getting to know you games that'll soften any possible discomfort. We also have up here cast a wide net, which is really important. You're going to end up probably recruiting more people than you need. Always look for a larger number. There's no exact science or mathematical equation to that, but we will say if you need one new person, try to find 3 to 5 places where you can recruit from if you're looking for one person who's going to actually wind up being a mentor. So, about making matches. So the key points here are coordinating schedules, considering personalities and temperament, facilitating and setting goals for the match, and following your own instincts. Matching mentors with mentees in school settings is often largely based on schedules and mutual availability. It's a very important consideration. Make sure you're making match with between mentors and mentees who have the scheduled time available to meet with each other in a given week. Another consideration should be personalities. Use your instincts. Ask yourself, are these two temperaments suited to each other? I always say, when all else fails, follow your gut and see if it feels right to you. And help get to get the matches started by helping the mentor and the mentee set some initial goals for themselves. They don't necessarily have to know what their long-term goals for the year are, but help them set some short-term goals. But before you do all of that, you're going to want to make sure that your mentors have been trained properly. Programs should have established guidelines that they share with mentors, students, and families. This helps to avoid misunderstandings and to clarify expectations, which is very, very important. Mentor training should include tips on how to get match relationships started and the importance of maintaining a schedule. Practice using strength-based communication. All of us can learn to move from our default, which is often to admonish or correct students, to the practice of rephrasing our thoughts to reflect positive behavior. If you're interested, you can look up No Such Thing as a Bad Kid by Charlie Applestein. He actually has a website, charliea.com. Help mentors understand the unique qualities of the culture and community your students reside in. Discuss the challenges students face in their communities, in their families, and as preteens and adolescents. Try to normalize student behavior. It's really, really important. And just an aside to that, I often find when I train volunteers, when I'm able to do an exercise where I put them in touch with their adolescent selves, it helps give them a framework to help normalize behavior better. It's important to set boundaries. It's helpful for mentors to have ideas about what activities they can do with their mentees, whether it's shooting hoops, playing board games, or just going through magazines during a lunch hour. Next slide, please. So, creating a culture of mentoring, an overall culture of mentoring. Design a mentoring match launch event, as we mentioned earlier, to make it more comfortable for the students. There's always safety in numbers, so engage participants in icebreakers and getting to know you games. Whether or not a school is initiating a formal mentoring program, it's not hard to create a mentoring culture throughout the whole school. Anyone can learn how to incorporate strength-based communication techniques and improve their interpersonal skills. It just takes some self-reflection and a little practice. Schools can look at all the ways that they can make the campus atmosphere safer and more welcoming. It behooves all of us to examine our interactions with families and to think more of effective ways for engaging students and their caregivers. Research shows us that when program leads are more directly involved with each mentor, matches tend to last longer with students having better outcomes. Be available to your mentors and role model good mentoring by the way you communicate with them. I always say that mentor coordinators are like relationship coaches, and they're really the mentors to the mentors. Provide mentors with opportunities for venting. Mentoring can be frustrating. Help your mentors to not personalize what they perceive as students' reluctance to engage. Young people test relationships all the time, and in mentoring, it's no different. Challenge your mentor's threshold for frustration. As I mentioned before, it's always good to normalize students out of classroom behaviors for the mentors. Role model, strength-based communication. If you want mentors to find a more positive way to communicate with students, you need to show them through the way you communicate with your mentors. Think through problems and provide realistic options for them. Be a thinking partner for your mentors. Help matches to set goals, as we mentioned before, goals for themselves, and monitor their objectives. Bring mentors together to share information and experience, and bringing them together is a very effective way to provide support and enhance supervision. Mentors like to help each other, and hearing about other mentors' challenges helps normalize many of the issues that they face. I find this is an extremely effective supervision technique in any kind of a mentoring program, and that's bringing the mentors together as a group periodically to share their experiences with each other. Okay, so sustaining a culture of mentoring, closure. Like it or not, all relationships are going to come to an end. With school-based mentoring, it is often in June when the term is wrapping up, but it is possible the mentor or the student may no longer be able to maintain the relationship earlier on. If this is the case, there needs to be a protocol in place for termination and saying goodbye. To start with, mentors and coordinators should develop a realistic timeline for ending the match. If you think either the mentor or the mentee or both need additional support and encouragement, offer to facilitate a conversation. It is not uncommon for mentors to lose sight of what is being accomplished with their student mentees. Program coordinators really should encourage be the encourager and the second set of eyes, and help mentors to see what they've accomplished with the time that they've donated. Point out where a student was prior to the match and where they may be now with regard to attendance and academics.
So before we start wrapping up this webinar, I want to take a pause now, because I think between Sarah Peterson, Sarah Jonas, talking about sort of the broader sense of chronic absenteeism and the practices, and then the mentoring pieces that are components of Success Mentor, I want to open it up to questions and allow individuals to be able to either type in their questions or speak their questions. All attendees are unmuted. And there was just one question really quickly around, or a statement around getting the slides so that they're created to post around the building. I'm not sure if that's something Sarah and Sarah can do, so I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, this is Sarah. Absolutely. Both this deck as well as other decks and resources that you can use to make the case, to do the pitch or what have you. Absolutely, we have those at our website at www.communityschools.nyc. And again, those are slides and resources that can be used by any school in the system or really anywhere. They're not New York specific per se. They're about these strategies that anyone can use. So absolutely, we'll make this deck available, and the last slide in this presentation has links to both our website as well as other mentors' website and other places where you can get great resources for this work.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay.
I know I often get asked about Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I know I often get asked about like schools wanting help with, you know, kind of technical assistance around success mentoring, and so I'm really excited that you guys are able to share a little bit. I know the next slide is about need technical assistance. I was just actually asked about this yesterday, so that would be great if you could share some of the ways that Mentor can provide site-based support.
She gotta get it together because
Yes. So let me move to the next slide to be able to do that. And Bruce, go ahead.
Okay, so, well, we hope this introduction was helpful and that you have a better understanding of why success mentors could work in your school and how to implement an effective program. There are some additional resources we want to offer to you. The National Mentoring Partnership, which is known as Mentor, has a robust resource page that includes a 200-page document of best practices in mentoring and research and resources for school-based programs. You can also, through the National Mentoring Resource Center, you can receive up to 30 hours of free consulting. And both of those links are right up here. On-site training, resources, and at mentor.org, the tools and the toolkit, which are kind of, are really the universally accepted best practices for any kind of a youth-based mentoring initiative, whether it's in school or not. So we highly recommend those. If you want personalized technical assistance, please click on the National Mentoring Resource Center.org, follow the prompts. It is a way to, like I said, to get free, up to 30 hours at a time of free technical assistance and consulting tailored to your school.
And what we'll do post this webinar, all participants will receive a follow-up email with those corresponding links and also our contact information for the team so that you can reach out to us. Even if you're not aware of how you want to navigate and get this started, know we're all here for you to be thinking partners and support you through this process. And it might start today and the implementation happen a year from now. That's fine. It takes time sometimes to think it through and be strategic. So we're here to support and help you. I'll hand it back to Sarah and Sarah. Sarah and Sarah, are you there? All right, so finally, these are the additional resources that are available to you. I want to apologize for some of the technical difficulties that we've had this morning. Our Wi-Fi here has been temperamental at best, but we hope that you got the information you needed. And any other additional information, we are here for you to support you. Yeah. We will make sure to send a survey to follow up this webinar. We'll make the deck available and you'll have links available as well. Thank you so much for your time. This concludes the webinar.